It is shocking. This is the man that has an entire movement behind him.
What are your thoughts on gay marriage? I think the Bible should be taught in schools. And in the Bible, God kills 42 children by a bear attack because they made fun of someone for being bald. It just doesn't sound very pro-life to me.
Does the supposed comedian with the Young Turks prove that Christian evangelicals are a bunch of hypocrites for voting for Donald Trump? We'll talk about that today on Indie Thinker. Welcome to the show. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. My name is Reed Huberman. Today's show is sponsored by our friends over at CMG Home Loans. As rates get lower, you may be interested in refinancing or purchasing a new home. And if you're going to do that, you need to check out our friends over at CMG. Not only will you be doing them a great favor, but you'll also be doing us here at the show a great favor. So check out CMG Home Loans. And when you do so, let them know that Indie Thinker sent you. Now, I've never talked about the Young Turks on the show before. And so today I'm going to break that tradition and discuss what they have to say in a recent video where their minds are being boggled because Christian evangelicals are voting for Trump. Now, they specifically chose, frankly, the dumbest people that they could possibly find for man on the street interviews to engage in this subject, and it makes them come away looking like they actually know something about the Bible. Well, thankfully, I'm here to come to the rescue because I'm here to show you that, again, atheists know absolutely nothing about Christianity, and that atheism does not exist because of a lack of evidence for God, but largely because either the individual is ignorant and has not studied, or they refuse to study because they do not care if there is any evidence for the existence of God or for the truth behind the claims that the Christian Bible makes. Now, for evidence of this, I want to direct you first to the penultimate atheist. I want to take you to Richard Dawkins, who no less than acknowledges the fact that he knows nothing about Christian theology. Check it out.
I mean, the way that you talk about theology might put someone off trying to do that.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Well, okay, but I mean, why would I bother to read Christian theology any more than Australian Aboriginal theology? Or
because it's what you're doing, it's what you're engaging with.
I've got better things to do. I do science.
Now, to that, I can only say this: God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth on purpose. And I know you don't believe that, but let me tell you why, so that you could listen more and talk less. If you don't know what you're talking about, you shouldn't become one of the most vocal critics about that subject, regardless of what kind of disdain you have for it. But here on display is the Young Turks, who have a disdain for Christian Americans and a real ignorance on the subject of Christianity as they engage people with how their religious worldview conflicts with their fixation or their decision to vote for Donald Trump. So let's hear what the Young Turks have to say.
I have great relationship with God. I have great relationship with the evangelicals. In fact, nationwide, I'm up by a lot.
It is shocking. This is the man that has an entire movement behind him.
What are your thoughts on gay marriage?
Now, it doesn't say why there is a movement behind him, and the movement they're speaking of is Christian evangelicals, obviously. But the movement is very simple to understand. We do not believe, and I know, hold on to your hats, because this is going to be difficult for you to grapple with, because you've probably never heard this one before. We don't believe in murdering babies. So, as a result of that, we are behind the guy who is the most pro-life president. Of course, we know that would not be Kamala Harris. It would be Donald Trump. Now, the reason it's important to stop here is because this is never stated, and it is always strawmanned by people like the Young Turks here. Whenever a Christian evangelical comes out and says they're going to vote for Donald Trump, they always say things like, oh, so you appreciate a man who says they're going to grab a woman by the P word? Or you think that he's a moral pillar when he's had so many indictments against him and blah, 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 blah. No, the argument for us is very simple. We never said that Donald Trump is a pillar of moral virtue. We said Donald Trump is more pro-life than Kamala Harris. So they consistently want to strawman the issue while we've been very clear on the issue. Anybody who says that we're voting for Donald Trump because we believe he's God's man or because we believe he's a prophetic choice from God, no. We're simply voting for Donald Trump because he is the most pro-life candidate, because there's this Christian belief about murdering innocent babies that we actually kind of hold to. So that's why we're voting for him. So it's not that hard. We could stop the video right now, but let's hear what else they have to say.
What are your thoughts on gay marriage?
I'm against it.
Yeah?
Yep.
And why is that?
Because of my religious belief.
And what religion are you?
I'm a Lutheran.
Lutheran. Because in the Bible, Leviticus, if a man lays with a man as he lays with a woman, surely he should be put to death. It's against it there?
Yep.
Also in Leviticus, it says you can't eat pork. Have you ever eaten pork?
A lot.
Okay.
The good liars, meanwhile, are quite literally doing the Lord's work in the heart of
Okay. In other words, he's talking about Donald Trump there, but I'm only assuming he's also throwing some shade on this individual he just spoke to, who thinks Lutheranism is a religion rather than a denomination within Christianity. It's clear this young dude is picking on this older man that doesn't know what he's talking about. So he chose the worst representative for these kind of things. And if you ever want me to come on the Young Turks, I would be happy to do so, to explain this to you to your face. But simply, the accusation here seems to be Christians are cherry picking. They'll eat bacon, but they have a problem with homosexuality based upon the Old Testament. And the Bible contradicts itself over and over again, so it's an unreliable document that you can't trust. Okay, so let me be very clear with you that yes, we are cherry picking, but we're cherry picking predicated upon the evidence of what is in the Bible, which you clearly don't seem to know. Because there are three kinds of laws in the Old Testament. There are ceremonial, civic, and moral laws. Homosexuality and gay sex would fall under the confines of the moral law, whereas eating bacon is a dietary law and falls under ceremonial law. In the Old Testament, God told his people to have certain dietary restrictions so that he could set them apart from the rest of the world, but that wasn't necessarily in line or equivalent to saying, hey, don't kill people because I want to set you apart from the rest of the world. No, because killing, no matter what, is totally wrong. Furthermore, if you knew the Bible, you would know this, that the moral law is consistently upheld throughout the New Testament under Jesus Christ because he still wants to uphold those things like not bearing false witness and not killing people and not coveting and not taking your neighbor's wife. All that stuff is still in effect. But the one thing Jesus oddly never talks about is ceremonial laws like not eating bacon. That's because those laws were just a precursor until Christ came to this earth and fulfilled those laws. And then therefore we see in the book of Acts that God says those dietary restrictions were only for a time for ceremonial purposes and not because they are for time and memoriam moral laws. And here's the big argument at the end of the day. The reason homosexuality falls under the restrictions of the moral law is because marriage is ordered toward the education and the rearing of children, which homosexual couples cannot do. And so, point of fact, there is no such thing as gay marriage. That's why we as Christians don't believe in marriage, because marriage, again, is principally ordered toward the rearing and the education of children. So, since homosexual couples can't do that, and it is only within the confines of a man and a woman in a home that it is best suited to raise children and to educate those children, we say that marriage is the wrong term there. Now, you can talk about homosexual unions and whether it should be legal and all of that, and we can have that podcast discussion on a different day. But the one thing you cannot do is say a man and a man coming together for a lifelong relationship is a marriage, because it isn't. Because it is principally, marriage is principally the institution of a man and a woman coming together to recreate children. And since two men or two women can't do that, therefore, that's not what marriage is, because we don't live in a world where God created round squares. So, gay marriage doesn't actually exist. That's why we don't believe in it. And it falls under the restrictions of the moral law, which, yes, we cherry pick. We pick that moral law to consistently follow because it is what is best for society, whereas the ceremonial law was something that was only for a certain particular time and a certain requirement and restriction for God's people at that time. However, on the other hand, you guys cherry pick too. Let's just be really clear about this. It's just that when you cherry pick, you don't do so based upon the Bible. You just simply do so based upon your sexual proclivities. So we're both cherry picking here. At least we have a valid reason for doing so. All right, let's keep going.
The heart of MAGA land.
I don't like to have to ask for forgiveness, and I am good. I don't do a lot of things that are bad. I try and do nothing that's bad. I live a very different life than probably a lot of people would think, and I have a very great relationship with God, and I have a very great relationship with evangelicals, and I think that's why I'm doing so well with Iowa.
A man who reportedly mocks religious leaders behind closed doors, calling them scam artists and hustlers when the cameras are not present, according to those formerly in his inner circle.
I think the Bible should be taught in schools.
Oh, by the way, I'm a Christian evangelical, have been in full-time ministry for over 20 years, and some of them are scam artists and hustlers. Not all of them, obviously. Very few of them actually are. Whenever an atheist kind of brings up the fact that there's all these scandals in the church, it's just like, just stop it. Like, whatever scandal you want to talk about, we can bemoan that together. But by and large, the vast majority of churches in America are actually doing really good things for average citizens on a daily basis. So Donald Trump is just merely saying here that he doesn't like asking for forgiveness because he wants to live a good and moral life. Have you ever heard cackling Kamala ever say anything anywhere close to that? Does she actually even care about whether or not her life is impacting the lives of other people and whether or not her decisions actually are moral and good and cohere with a religious moral standard that actually can help a society thrive? No, because she doesn't care about that stuff at all. So all that to say, Donald Trump here doesn't do anything to undermine his case as a Christian. And in fact, I agree with him. I try to live my life in such a way where I don't have to ask for forgiveness all the time for the things that I'm doing, which is actually kind of a responsible Christian thing.
Bible should be taught in schools.
Yes.
Yeah?
Most definitely. Because
Yeah.
children have gotten away from that, because they have. And it needs to be put back in all the schools, Catholic schools and public schools.
So you want the Bible back in school. Do you think there are books that should be banned from schools?
Yeah, of course.
There is a book that has a story of two daughters getting their father drunk and having sex with them. Would you want that in a school?
No, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah, of course.
no.
Of course.
No,
That's
that's
outrageous.
the devil's work. We don't want the devil's work in school.
All right, well, there you have it. Talk to some people who want the Bible taught in school, but also want the Bible banned in school. So
Still, not only do they buy the BS, they completely eat it up over and over.
I fail to see how any of this is funny at all. You speak to a bunch of bumpkins who don't know anything about the Bible and don't realize that he's talking about Noah. And he's also totally strawmanning this whole argument. The supposedly Don't Say Gay bill, which is stupidly named because, of course, the bill doesn't have anything to do with not saying gay and simply has to do with third graders and below not reading, like gender queer. So that bill was just simply trying to help make sure that there was age-appropriate material in schools, which, again, if we're talking about the story in the Bible, I would say the same thing. I believe that we should teach children scripture in schools because it has historical implications, historical significance, and these are historical stories at the end of the day. But I also would say that it should be age appropriate, just like Republicans have been consistently doing throughout Florida and in other places where there are supposed book bans. Now, let me show you one of the most commonly quote-unquote banned books in school libraries, Genderqueer, which has been banned in 138 districts in 32 states. The reason Genderqueer is banned is not just because it has a material in it that has to be age appropriate, but simply because it has graphic depictions of all sorts of sexual proclivities, and it teaches you how to do that. So I'll just step back. Even if you don't buy my age-appropriate argument and the fact that genderqueer is not age-appropriate for anybody in any school whatsoever, because after all, we're not trying to put porn in schools, are we? Maybe some of those people are. But even if you don't buy the kind of age-appropriate thing, at least we could go with the intent of the book. Genderqueer is intended to try to teach people how to do these things, to sexually indoctrinate children, whereas the Bible is condemning this act as sinful. So even if you're going to introduce this to small children, at least the intent of the Bible is definitely good and pure. It's not advocating the practice, whereas Genderqueer and other books like it that should be banned in schools are advocating the practice. So at least we could get some moral formation along with your the consistent strawmans we see from people on the left.
Again,
We are praying for you, and we are here for you.
And I'm a believer, big league, in God, in the Bible.
Melania and I are praying for every American. We all pledge allegiance to very, very beautifully one nation under God. I hear this is a major theme right here, but 2 Corinthians, right? 2 Corinthians 3:17, that's the whole ball game.
It's an insult to religion that so many people of faith follow this man and take his word for it when he clearly is conning them still.
That is a total non sequitur, by the way. I just hope you realize that they have not proven their case at all that Donald Trump is a religious hypocrite. I mean, that they could bring up some things that might suggest this, but they haven't even done that up to this point in this video. Now, I would say certainly Donald Trump's past is a non-Christian past, but I don't know if you know this about every single Christian on the planet. But every single Christian on the planet has a non-Christian past, because every single Christian is born with original sin and therefore has to convert to Christianity and ask forgiveness for their sins, which Donald Trump supposedly has. So I yet to see the point that's really being made here with any of this stuff. And by the way, if you want to bring up the supposed event that we're not even sure really took place between Trump and one of his accusers that took place 20 years ago, we don't really know at what point in time Donald Trump started taking his faith very, very seriously, because he didn't start talking about it until recently, admittedly. But if you can actually show me evidence that would show how Donald Trump truly should be questioned in terms of his spiritual commitment beyond anecdotal, little, just childish, immature jabs at him, then I'm not ready to believe that he is a religious hypocrite based upon your anecdotal evidence.
Word for it when he clearly is conning them still.
Consider yourself pro-life.
100%. You know, God said, suffer the little children, for that such is the kingdom of God. So, I mean, every crime against a child is a big thing in God's eyes.
And in the Bible, God kills 42 children by a bear attack because they made fun of someone for being bald.
Yeah, and what's your point?
It just doesn't sound very pro-life to me.
Well, you know what? The thing of it is when you really...
He killed children, 42 of them by a bear attack.
Well, you could even go this. When the children of Israel taken over the land of Canaan, he said, wipe them all out. Okay. Women, children, everything.
So we found some agreement that God is not very pro-life.
No, God is pro-life.
It's also clear Trump...
Okay, this is just very similar to the argument that you can't believe in the death penalty if you're a Christian. So when God is instituting these kind of things, he is instituting the death penalty, at least in terms of the 42 supposedly children who were killed by bear attack because they mocked the prophet Elisha, which is what this guy is saying. Now, I don't expect him to know this because he doesn't know about the Bible at all. He's already proven that. But the idea is simply that these supposed children mocked Elisha and then God sent a bear to kill them is not exactly true, because the word that is translated to children there, you will find in other translations, doesn't say children. In fact, it can mean adult male leader. And so the idea here is that these children are not just mocking Elisha for being bald, but they're saying, get out of here, man of God, you bald dude, and go fly away. In other words, get away from us just like Elijah did, who flew away. We don't want anything to do with you. And the reason they're saying this is because they are adult male leaders, which most people who have studied the Bible and studied this issue think that these individuals are actually false priests of Baal or maybe another false deity, and they're trying to get rid of him because they don't want to hear the word of God. And that's why God is judging them, not just because they are mocking Elisha, but simply because these false prophets are committing atrocities in the land. And whenever we see God implementing these kind of penalties, it is always because of a prior moral sin. All that to say, it is different when we're talking about innocent babies compared to people who have done things that rightly require judgment. So you can, I think, seriously make the case, which I won't try to do completely now, I'll just kind of flatly state it, that you can be pro-life and you can be pro-death penalty, because you can make the argument that if you are protecting more lives in the aggregate by getting rid of this one guilty life, then you are actually saving lives by getting rid of these guilty parties who have been taking lives and have been killing people. And all throughout the Bible, we see that the people God judges are in the practice of doing some pretty atrocious things. All that to say, God is the moral arbiter of the universe, and he has good reasons to do the things that he does. Just because you don't know the Bible well enough to come up with that isn't anybody else's problem.
Of Americans, I've seen pictures of people praying over you.
It's incredible, actually.
Her question is, she says, you've been faced with so much adversity and persecution for years. What's your relationship with God like, and how do you pray?
I think it's good. I do very well with the evangelicals. I love the evangelicals. And I have more people saying they pray for me. I can't even believe it. And they are so committed, and they're so believing. They say, sir, you're going to be okay. I pray for you every night. I mean, everybody, almost, I can't say everybody, but almost everybody that sees me, they say it. It's such a beautiful thing.
Come on, guys. This isn't the talk of a healthy person. This is a power-hungry buffoon who is playing his bass like a fiddle.
Let us pray, because we're fighting a demonic force. We're fighting the real enemy that comes from the gates of hell, led by one of his leaders called Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
The Trump team also knows how to play the game, bringing on for-profit televangelists to say stuff like this at his rallies, which eventually leads to this.
When you start late-term aborting children or aborting them after they've been born, that's nuts.
Aborting them after they've been born?
Yes.
You think that's happening?
It is. Does.
I don't think that's happening.
Well,
aborting children after they're born wouldn't be called abortion, though, right?
Well, they still call it abortion.
What would they? That would be called murder.
Well, finally, a moment of clarity and honesty, and the last thing we'll talk about today, because I think you get the gist at this point in time. Yeah, abortion is actual murder, and it is taking place where botched abortions and children who are born alive outside of their mother's womb and are surviving are then killed. I mean, Donald Trump has said this, not eloquently many times, but has talked about Ralph Northam, what he said when he was doing an interview where he talks about babies who are born alive after an abortion and what we should do with them. Here's him saying that you should just set the baby aside, make him as comfortable as possible, have a little meeting and discussion, a little conference call, maybe a Zoom session, and then let's just sesh it up a bit and talk about whether or not we should let that baby live or now if we should just kill him. So here's him talking about it.
If a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion.
So let's take a step back for a moment and say, it is clear that late-term abortions are happening, but they are rare. The vast majority of them happen in the first term, within that time frame where a baby can have a heartbeat. You can see it on a sonogram. You can see that it has its own fingerprints, its own arms and legs, and all of that. That's when Democrats say that it's okay to abort a baby. So that's when the vast majority of them take place. But here's the real problem with it all. Democrats are deeply hypocritical when it comes to all of their claims of actually caring about people, because they clearly don't care about the most marginalized among us. And I'm not only talking about babies in the womb, I'm also talking about minors who cannot consent to their own medical care. Because Tim Walz, as governor of Minnesota, did this. He made sure to eliminate all restrictions for minors that were seeking abortions, including a 24-hour waiting period and making sure to inform their parents. So Tim Walz made that happen, and if elected, Harris and Walz will make sure that our country turns into a radical abortion haven. Now, the reason I bring this up is just simply, if there is a hypocrite, it's not Donald Trump, who may not be the best example of Christianity, but certainly is a better one than Kamala Harris, because Kamala is the hypocrite in the sense that she talks about joy and caring about the marginalized in our society and in our community, those small businesses that need the help of the government, and not just wanting big government to take over, but caring about people. Well, this radical abortion organization known as the Democratic Party clearly doesn't care about the most marginalized people in society, and that is babies in the womb. And if they won't care for them, then you can rest assured that they do not give a damn about you, which is why I would much rather, as a Christian evangelical, hold my head up high voting for Donald Trump than Kamala Harris any day of the week. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and go with God.